Hello, everybody, and hello, Jeffrey. Jeffrey Fidelman, right? Do I have it right?
You do? Yes.
Okay. Jeffrey is a Harvard alum who started his career in finance, working for Morgan Stanley and then HSBC. He was then recruited to join a family office, a venture fund, which was focused on early stage tech and tech enabled investments. In 2015, he brought together both worlds to start Fidelman and Company, an investment bank that works with early stage companies and emerging managers. You must have a very interesting job, Jeffrey.
I love what I do, so I'm fortunate in that.
And that's what it takes to be an entrepreneur, correct?
I suppose. Yes,
We have
there
to
has
love
to
what
be an
we do.
element of love.
So, welcome to Under the Hood. And Under the Hood is all about patterns that are created in childhood impact us as grown-ups. And I interview wonderful leaders and people who have done a lot of work, a lot of personal work, a lot of business work to reach a position where now they are kind of leading other people. So I like to look at the patterns that helped kind of get you where you are.
Sure.
Okay. So the first one I'm going to ask you is just tell us a little bit about your family background. That has always a lot to do with the values and the core values and things that you have grown up with.
Sure. Family background. So my parents are immigrants. They came here
Hmm.
both from Soviet Union in the
Mm.
late 70s, both having come here just past high school age,
Mm.
both having come here with their parents respectively. And I always joke that they met in like a computer class, and neither of them can use a computer to this day. But they met each other, so I'm thankful for that. Um, so that's who my parents, or rather, where they came from. They moved here. Then I was born. My father owned a body shop and like an auto
Hmm.
mechanic repair shop.
Hmm.
And my mom, having been an accountant for some time, years later went to go work basically with my dad, and she would work with him in the office doing all the accounting, and he would take care of, I guess, all the front office of of the mechanic shop.
Mm.
So that's background. I'm one of two. I have a sister who is 9 years my junior. Same
Mm.
parents. Um, I grew up in Long Island, first way out on the island in a town called Kings Park.
Oh,
And around 10 years old, I moved, or my parents rather, moved to a town called Great Neck, which is much
I,
kind of closer
yes,
on the.
I know them both. I can see that where Kings Park is, and I certainly know Great Neck.
So that's where I grew up by and large in Great Neck. Um, and yeah, I mean, what else specifically?
What else besides the facts? So, your parents being, you are a first generation American,
That's right.
and that frequently has some significant um, patterns that your parents came with, some values. Again, they came from the Soviet Union. I know that we share a religious background, a Jewish background.
Yes.
And so, again, my family was from Russia as well. So I'm just curious in terms of that kind of flavor of how that helped you kind of build into the values that you have today. That's really kind of the piece.
I think it's material and woven through the fabric that is me, um,
Hmm.
from a variety of different perspectives. Growing up, religion was really more about culture for me, quite
Hmm.
frankly,
Hmm.
and certainly now it's I'm changing. Certainly, having kids has changed that a little bit, and I want to continue it down. But um, parents and family being from kind of a Soviet Union background, yes, being Jewish as well, it was less about praying and going to a synagogue and
Hmm.
more about family events and holidays
Hmm.
and getting
Yes.
together. We did a lot of that. So family in and of itself was ingrained quite deeply for me, and I kind of reflect that now with my wife and our kids and the family
Hmm.
that we are now building and growing ourselves. And I also believe that there was a unique work ethic instilled as well,
Yeah.
where it was really important never to be wasting time. And I don't know
Hmm.
how much of that I can pass down to my kids. But there was no there was no such thing so much as camp. It was, go work, go find a job, go figure it out, make your own money, make your own way. And
Hmm.
that was ingrained in me as far back as I can remember.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, but so too is education. Um,
Hmm.
being able to read, being able to do math. I say that, from an obvious perspective,
Right.
being able to really excel in school was very important to my parents,
Hmm.
and that was always kind of a cornerstone of what it was. And of course, coming from Soviet Union and then going through educational system here, there was a big disconnect between
Hmm.
the math that was being done at the age that was being done, and even the literature that was being taught in schools. But grades reflect the same way, no matter what language or country you're in. There's the
Right.
top grade, there's the bottom grade, there's something in the middle, and anything at the bottom or the middle is unacceptable.
I was going to say the expectation
Exactly. Exactly.
was up here, right? So one of the pieces again that when we were talking a little bit before we went on, the patterns that I see in people who take leadership roles where it becomes sort of a natural thing, maybe not so natural, but it is this work ethic. And this, I was talking to one fellow yesterday, I said, "How did the perfectionism get in the way?" And he said, "Oh my God." you know, he said, "I had to learn how to not,
Right.
kind of keep that as an expectation." How about for you, in terms of that excellence, where does it kind of help you? And then kind of where does it hurt you a little bit?
I suppose there's two sides of that same coin. I
Hmm.
think that in everything that I do, I take ownership over. And I am acutely aware that not everyone feels that way. Whether
Yeah.
it's an email that you send, a statement that you make, a project that you put together and deliver, that is your ownership. Whether or not you
Hmm.
put it together, whether or not your analyst or somebody else put it together and you reviewed it, as long as it is you delivering the product, the service, the message, whatever it is, you must take ownership over that. And if you are going to take ownership over that, it is also equally important to make sure, at least to me, that there's a high quality of whatever that deliverable is, the
Hmm.
spoken word all the way down to the pitch deck or financial model. It's really important that that is a representation of me and my delivery and how I'm able to deliver something along those lines. Um, and the other side of that same coin is a saying I've
Yes.
heard time and time again, which is perfection is the enemy of done.
Right.
And while I do think that there's an incredible need for quality, there's while I said they're two sides of the same coin, they don't have to contradict one another. And
Hmm.
the way that I have been able, at least to manage from a business perspective, is to set proper expectations, number one. But number
Hmm.
two, even in delivering a product or project, I often, as a first draft, call it a first draft and set the expectation that it's a first draft, that this is not meant to be a final piece of material when I'm delivering it, at least the first or second time around, but rather
Hmm.
this is a draft. I am soliciting your emotional reaction to this document or to a statement I'm making because that is the way that we can iterate and make it perfect together.
Hmm.
So, take that for what you will.
No, I mean, I think that that's a really nice way, good way of kind of getting the quality that you want. Um, Also, as a leader, person in charge, you can't micromanage everybody or everything. And so, how do you deal with employees that don't necessarily have that same, value?
I think holding people responsible to very clear metrics, KPI, quota, whatever the case may be, but holding them responsible, but also setting them up for success.
Hmm.
Meaning, when we are either onboarding a person or if we have a client who wants to onboard or go out and hire somebody into the C-suite, it's incredibly important to make sure that there's alignment, number one, of interests, and number two, of expectations, right? What are my expectations for you bringing on a new analyst? What are my expectations of you bringing you on as a COO of a business? These are the
Hmm.
expectations that I have for you. Here are quantitative and qualitative. The quantitative need to be agreed on together prior to that
Hmm.
person coming in. And I see this as employees as well. They have to see what the process is, what the workflow is, what our quota and expectation is of them, so
Hmm.
that they can acknowledge it and come in. And that way, 3, 6, 12 months down the line, no one is ever going to come to me and say, Jeff, you set me up for success. I never,
Right.
ever would have hit these numbers.
Right.
Well, we agreed on those numbers together, and you said you would. So there's that conversation is avoided down the line. But it's also about aligning interests. I believe very fervently, and anybody who's ever worked for me will hopefully will agree, and I think they will, is that interests must be aligned. No matter how much you
Hmm.
love what you do, you're not doing what you do out of altruism. Most people are not. They're
Right.
doing it to get paid.
Right.
And I mean, I'm running an investment bank, so we don't even have right. We just, and I want to make sure that alignment of interest is there. So I've told my team before that I look at myself as a conduit to our clients.
Hmm.
If our clients are happy, then they communicate that to me, and I communicate that to my analysts and the people that work for the firm. If our clients are not happy, they communicate that to me, and
Is it
I
you and you?
communicate the same thing. So it's not,
Right.
I don't ever feel one way or another. I know
Hmm.
what we deliver. I know what we set the expectations to our clients that we deliver. And if we meet or exceed those expectations, they're very happy. If we don't, then quite frankly, they're not happy. And that means that something is actually going
Right.
wrong on the inside, so to speak.
Right. So you have your core values kind of running through the whole system from what I'm hearing you say, right? And one of the things that's true about leaders is everything comes from the top,
Sure.
right? So if you hold, I mean, I remember one of my kids was talking about two different high schools, and he said, you know, this high school expects more of their students than this one does. He said, I want to go over here, you know, where he could have gotten away with a lot less.
Mhm.
But it's true. And there's another thing about expectations that I think is really important that you kind of bring up in a certain way. I always say if your expectation is over here and your reality is over here, there's nothing but frustration and disappointment
That's
in
good.
between, right? So how quickly can we get reality and our expectation aligned,
Mhm.
right? Because that's kind of what you described. If we're in alignment over here and something's off, then we have you know, this is what's real.
Sure.
These are the numbers, and working with numbers, you know, they don't lie.
Yeah, and it's I think that my team finds some solace in the fact that I will never ask anyone at our firm to do anything that I don't know how to do myself
Right,
personally, or I haven't done myself. Put together a presentation, financial model, pick up the phone and cold call investors. I have done literally every single position that anyone at our firm would be
right.
expected to do. And I also really believe in a meritocracy. There's no
Hmm.
one person that should be managing another without ever having done that job. I've experienced a lot of that through just professional
Yes,
background.
yes,
Um, and it's not that it doesn't seem fair, there's just such a disconnect behind figuring out a pain point and being able to work with that individual to make them better, as opposed
right,
to looking at a rubric or some sort of checklist and grading them based on something that you have never yourself done before.
right. But there's another saying I'll add, and I
Please.
didn't make it up, but it's so true. You cannot take a person to a place that you have never been.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, I'm definitely
Right,
gonna.
right, right. I got a lot of good ones, Jeff.
That's a really good one. Yeah, I agree with that. I fully agree with
Right,
that.
right. And even in the work that I've done over the years and the people that I've worked with and counseled and helped, and I can never say I know exactly how you feel
Mm.
if I haven't really had that experience. I might imagine, I can think about it, I can, you know, but I cannot say it with certainty.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I haven't experienced it. So tell us about tell us a story about something that you thought was going to go really well that didn't, and that you had to grow from it, from your own personal growth. Because I can hear, I'm a pretty trained ear. You've done a lot of good work a lot of good personal work to be able to take responsibility for yourself, which is a golden statement that not everybody can own. So one of the stories that would be helpful, anything that just kind of, God, I thought I had it, or it just didn't work out well, and I had to look at myself.
Well, I suppose perhaps because this was the prior question or my prior answer is around what I said about not asking anyone to do anything I haven't done before.
Hmm.
And today, July 3rd, 2025, we're a few months away from celebrating a 10-year anniversary of the firm. We started this in.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Um, and and it's not to say that what I now just said 30 seconds ago, I would have said 8 years ago or 10 years ago or 7 years ago, because we did try to do a lot of different things. And this firm, frankly, started growing by my coming out of that VC, my starting to work with entrepreneurs and founders and finding my own way. So that's why I was the only one doing a deck or a model, and I was a consultant, and then a group of consultants, and a consulting firm, and then eventually an investment bank. And what I recognized along the way is that there was always a need for other services that we could provide to our clients. There was always the opportunity to make more money in all of these different
Hmm.
ways. And growing a business, it's not the only thing you're focused on, but it's certainly one of the things you're focused on,
Hmm.
making revenue, generating business, expanding your business.
Hmm.
And um, and I would joke that before I would pick up the phone and say, yes, what is it can I help you with? Yes is the answer. What is the engagement? And we had a lot of asks for go-to-market strategy, for different operational type of management consulting. And I knew enough to know where I can find certain resources, really good
Hmm.
quality resources to help me with those engagements. But what ended up happening was that those engagements then began to rely on the intellectual capital of maybe one, maybe two individuals that was
Hmm.
not either my own or not open sourced
Right.
information across the firm. And for a variety of reasons, in almost each of those experiments, that individual who should have had ownership over it didn't rise to the same standards that I would have expected them to rise to, that I would have expected. At the end of the day, I put my name on the door, so I,
Right.
I
Exactly.
have a very high expectation of quality in what's going out. And and I realized that if that person's not performing on what they do, there's no possible way that I can step in and take over.
Hmm.
There's no possible way. So despite having all of these opportunities to expand and to generate additional revenue, I realized that all of those experiments were, I don't want to say failures in the sense of I learned a lot from them, so I can't really
Hmm.
call them failures,
Hmm. Hmm.
but they were not properly how to expand a business, at least our business, in the way that we had wanted to.
Hmm.
And that's why even more so we ended up leaning into the investment banking piece, into what we do in terms of fundraise as a service, because that I leaned more into what I knew exactly what to do, how to do
Right.
it, how to implement it, with or without any one individual being kind of part or parcel to the firm.
Right. So it enabled you to really, and I love the way you said that because I think the only failures are the ones that we don't learn from. Even yeah, even job interviews when my kids are, interviewing for jobs, I said, did they give you any feedback? You know, did they tell you why? Did they tell you, no, we just got this letter and it's like, ah, that's not useful. It's just not useful.
Well, I think the curve of how it all happened is something, you always think about, especially I think about after having kids, like what would I tell them to do that I did versus not
Hmm.
even tell them that I did. And I think that there's such an interesting juxtaposition, and it's true, and it almost has to happen naturally, where yes is the answer, now what is the question?
Hmm.
And over time, that means you're a generalist, you're,
Exactly.
an inch wide and a mile deep, or rather an inch deep and a mile wide. And then you
Hmm.
start cultivating experience in whatever it is that you're good at. And that conversation turns into, I'm really, really good at what I do. And this is now how I pitch myself to clients. I'm really, really good at what I do, and I don't do anything outside of that.
I say exactly the same thing. Don't ask me to do this, and don't ask me to do your
Exactly.
analytics, and don't ask, but ask me to do this. I'm
Yep.
good. I'm good. And
So
so, what is that? I know from my experience, but from your experience, being able to say that, what does that kind of do for you?
it allows me to focus a lot more. It allows me not to have like 80/20 rule. If I take on a
Mhm.
project that I don't really know how to deliver, well, we don't anymore, but thinking back to when
Mhm.
we did take on a project that we would have to scramble a little bit, or I'd really have to ideate with one of those people who are going to be leading it, it didn't provide me with agency, and it took
Mhm.
up more mental capacity and bandwidth than all of the other clients where I knew what we were executing on. So
Right.
now, kind of having the horse blinders on, so to speak, like we're
Mhm.
very focused on what we do. We introduce clients or potential clients to outside firms when they ask for something else. Like we're an investment
Mhm.
bank, but we don't do M&A. Oftentimes, I will refer that out. If somebody needs
Mhm.
accounting and wants to hire me as an interim CFO, I don't do accounting. Here is an
Mhm.
example of a firm that can do all of your accounting. I'd rather not get into those situations, despite there being an opportunity to
Right. Right.
build a business line there, um, because of the delivery.
Yeah. And I think it takes, as you said, I think it takes maturity. And sometimes it takes a lot of courage, even when you're a younger firm, to make that level of a commitment and to stick with it. And you may lose in the beginning, lose in order to gain. You have to be willing. Here's another one. You have to be willing to lose in order to gain. And that's always a decision that's not necessarily always black and white.
Mhm.
Right?
Agreed.
So one other question before we, I specialize a lot in conflict resolution. How do you deal with that in your firm and your business and even in your life?
I think that anytime there is a situation which draws an emotional reaction from me, at least in business or in personal life, I try to take a step back and not respond for sometimes a day, sometimes several
Mm,
hours, whatever the case may be. I think a response, and you might have a saying for this one too. I'm sure there is
I
one, but
do.
a
I
response
do.
out of emotion is probably not the right response. Not always. I mean, of course, certain circumstances call for an emotional response, but uh,
Hmm.
by and large, I think, again, as I said, a certain circumstance or a certain situation that elicits a very heavy emotional response means that you
Hmm.
should not respond.
Hmm.
Um, in terms of conflict, I think communication, going back to what I was saying, I think communication and setting expectations, maybe one and the same or one is a derivative of the
Hmm.
other, are
Hmm.
so incredibly important to any type of relationship. Building a business and having a culture amongst staff, building a relationship with a spouse, relationship with friends, building a relationship with anyone or anything, even if it's strangers online, communicating effectively and setting the expectation of what this relationship exchange or consideration will look like
Hmm.
is so incredibly important. So there's people with conflict with one another. What is the conflict about? We're all on the
Hmm.
same ship. We should all be rowing in the same direction. What is the problem? Is it a
Hmm.
personality thing? You just don't get along? And then it might be, it might be not endemic, but rather specific to one individual.
Hmm.
And that's a different conversation that needs to be had.
Hmm.
So,
So
dealing.
in this, what are the biggest challenges that you face, given that people are interesting and and complex?
Internally or with clients, or I guess how.
But you could go any which way. With clients, start there, or internally, or whatever.
I think you have to be a certain level of, you know, uh, I'll say crazy in crude terms, but free spirited and interesting in more PC terms to be an entrepreneur and to start your own business.
Hmm.
Or a fund manager. And so we deal with a lot of early stage companies and emerging managers, new fund managers. And in either way, you're starting a new business. You're selling a
Hmm.
product, you're selling a service, you're selling an investment, you're selling something, you're start selling something, and you report to yourself, so to speak.
Hmm.
And I think in that each person, regardless of industry or stage or even background or history, are so unique into of themselves,
Hmm.
where switching gears of personality, of the way that even we approach or communicate certain things from founder to founder, is is interesting in and of itself. Again, I love what I do. I love talking to different companies, and it's quite literally could be a nut milk blender in the morning, then a ground to space communications antenna in the afternoon, and then an AI imaging app for a fitting room. And that's the first half of the day, not even throughout the day.
Right.
And each of the founders, as you can imagine, space technology versus a nut milk blender versus an AI company, all significantly different with significantly different backgrounds and their approaches even to problem solving. But I do think that they come to me even more so now that I've recognized over time for
Hmm.
consistency. And I think
Hmm.
that that's what's so important as you were saying, as you mature, or maybe it's age, or maybe it's just experience. And I'll share an anecdote about it, kind of experience what someone told me once. But I think ultimately, whether it's doing podcasts or putting content out, or even dealing with clients who refer us to others, they're often looking for a consistent Jeff.
Hmm.
In an otherwise world of inconsistent advisors, the joke about ask 12 lawyers the same question, you'll get 12 different
Right.
answers. So I think that's important, at least to me, in terms of how I've been
Hmm.
able to deal with that. I know it sounds almost counterintuitive, where you would think you need to kind of meld yourself into acquiescing with who you're speaking with. But I think over time, what ends up working more is if you are you. uh, you can be consistently you with everyone you speak to, because ultimately that's what they come to you for.
That's
Not
true.
because they think you're going to be a yes man or yes woman and answer them however
Right.
they want, but because you have your own opinion, and that's ultimately what the value that you bring to the
Yes.
table.
Yes. Well, I think we could continue this conversation for a long time. There's a lot of, I always say I love deep. And to go back to your thing, this is my little, this, I did a TEDx talk a couple years ago, and this is my little mantra that I taught at that thing. When somebody comes along and you feel like the body gets triggered before the mind.
Oh yeah.
So when you use that, when I'm triggered, you didn't use the word trigger, but it's the same thing when emotionally I'm kind of taken, I have to stop.
Hmm.
For however long, I just need to stop and recognize that this is what's going on, right? And then I call it reframe. I go, well, what's going on in my thoughts and my feelings, and what do I need to do with this? Sometimes, right away, sometimes an hour, sometimes the next day, and then I need to respond.
Yeah,
So,
I agree with that.
yeah, yeah, it works. They have a
Yeah.
wonderful saying in AA says it works if you work it.
Yeah.
The stuff that we're talking about, just to all the people that are listening, these things work if you work them. They're sort of axioms. They're laws. They're just kind of universal laws. And I
Well,
always
no.
say that good. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was going to say no one, I don't want to say no one in an absolute, but very rarely will you, if for everyone listening, think about times when you had responded out of emotion. Rarely would you say, looking back on it, I wish I responded faster.
Mm.
You'll never say, I wish it, right? Like, you could wait. You can wait and then respond. And it's never going to put you in a situation, again, unless it's time sensitive, where you said, I wish I responded faster to that message, to that email, to that comment made that triggered me emotionally.
Very true. Very true. So again, we could go on and on and on. I have lots of stories and anecdotes and all that good stuff. But in the meantime, thank you so much, Jeff. This was wonderful, and we're going to put this out. And people, how do they get in touch with you?
Sure. So Jeffrey Fidelman is my name. Jeffrey at fidelmanco.com is my email address. The domain is our website, fidelmanco.com. Feel free to drop me a line. Yeah, with any questions.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, and we can't wait to get this out.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much, Sarah.
Amelia.
Likewise.
Bye.